The language of strategy development can be confusing to people new to it, and that confusion creates barriers for engagement and creativity in exactly the time when both of those things are needed in your strategic thinking. One set of phrases that is rattled off very frequently in strategic thinking and strategy discussions is B2c and B2b business models. In this short video, I will define what those mean, and I'll explain why it's important to clarify what your business model is before you start creating your strategic market focus. Business to business. A B2b business model is one in which a seller delivers a product or service directly to another business. So business to business. These relationships are often defined by terms like supplier, vendor, partner, ally, consultant, contractor. In complex and large supply chains, there may be many B2B relationships before the product or service is ultimately sold or delivered to the ultimate user or consumer. Speaking of consumers, the other core business is B2C, or business to consumer. And this is a business model in which an entity sells or delivers products and services directly to the end user or the consumer. We're all very familiar with these because of our own consuming habits. But what's important to know about a B2C business model is that it exists in both the for-profit and the nonprofit sectors. In fact, the majority of nonprofit entities are in the business of direct service to the communities they operate in. Leaders in the nonprofit sector would use the term direct service, not B2C, but the relationships are the same. Can you have both? Yes. In fact, many entities that start in a B2C business model expand into a vertically integrated business model as they grow. They do that because they want to gain more control over their supply chain, product development, and even costs. Alternatively, there is another type of business model called a horizontal business model in which businesses seek an expansion by going deep across maybe complementary businesses. This may happen through acquisitions in which the owners may maintain both brands post-acquisition and their B2B business model, or it can be an option to own more alternatives to the consumer. You see this in retail companies that own different kinds of retailers, ones that are low cost and provide a great deal of convenience, and ones that are more premium and offer a lot of service. There are many different varieties of these business model themes that come out of strategy development. But for the purpose of this strategic thinking fundamental lesson, we are going to focus on just B2B and B2C so that entrepreneurs and leadership teams who are getting started in defining their strategic focus get this key fundamental component down before they begin looking at their strategic market focus. So let's start with the B2C business model. If you have a B2C business model, you're in a large but highly competitive marketplace. And so having a strategic focus that allows you to fully understand how to leverage all of the things you can do to create preference is key. Where your strategic thinking starts to really cement is when you think about your secondary and tertiary audience groups. Who can you work with to build that loyalty and preference with your target audience? The B2B business model is an interesting business model to clarify your market focus, because a traditional view is very similar to a B2C model in that your primary audience is your customer. However, for a more strategic view of your market focus, I suggest you consider your customer's customer as the primary audience group for your market focus. If you think about it that way, then you stay ahead of your competitors by developing a deep understanding of how what you offer will provide a competitive advantage to your customer and therefore help them deliver a preference for whatever product or service they're engaged in. The key to all strategic thinking is to start with the end in mind. When developing your strategic market focus, the end is the experience and the preference of the end user or consumer of the product or service, regardless of the role that you play in the supply chain. Okay, that's your strategic thinking fundamentals, B2B versus B2C business models, and the implications that has on your market focus.